listening to Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. Small town feel with big time ideas. After all, you are entitled to Brad's opinion. Here's your host, Brad Allard.
Well, another great week ahead. Today starts early voting in this state, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about where to go at the end, so I would highly encourage y'all to vote. Here's a Trivial Pursuit question, Taylor, for you. Do more people in Texas vote on Election Day, or do they early vote?
I mean, I would say if you're patriotic, Election Day.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm guessing early voting?
Early voting, yes. I prefer Election Day. But
I knew that.
But since, Robin works until about 5:30 over at the jewelry store, she didn't want to go stand on her feet more for another hour or so waiting in line to vote. So we're going to go vote this afternoon, in fact, just to get it done. And so it'll be,
Nice. Maybe I'll see you there.
I haven't. I've come around on early voting. I'd still prefer to do it on that day, but you got to do what you got to do. And I encourage y'all to vote either way.
You're riding in Elon Musk, right?
Isn't voting for Trump the same thing? That's what they are saying anyway. But anyway, we're going to talk about the condition of the election right now. With some polls and some snapshots and whatnot. And we're going to also, I'm going to give not 3, but 4 reasons each why I think Harris will win or why I think Trump will win. And they all make sense. People ask me a lot since I do this for not just here, but at the colleges. They say, who do you think is going to win? And I just tell them, if I knew that, I'd be making a lot more money than I am right now. Well, you could put a lot of money on it. The betting odds have Trump winning, but I don't bet because I am terrible at it. I could bet it and lose on a one-horse race, and so I don't bet money. Anyway, let's talk about the sponsors because they make this possible, and then we're going to talk, go through a routine, and hopefully you'll share this with your friends. Our place, of course, with Otto, will be there Thursday with the Sunday school problem solvers or whatever we want to call ourselves. We call us the Dawn Patrol because we get there early. And you get there and it's always great service, always great food. It's they know us well by now, so the waitress is usually the same one, and she'll just go around the table and name off our orders. And it's pretty nice, convenient to be known in a place like that. Also, Gina's, of course, along with the great pizza. They all have the Sunday night music and karaoke during the week. And here's the thing also, we're doing the election contest again. Show me a picture of you voting or coming out of the voting booth. You can't take pictures in the voting area, certainly. But, with an I voted sticker or whatnot, we'll take your word for it. But it's always good to show that you voted. And you'll be put in a raffle for a $50 gift card. Now, a couple of nitwits on the usual suspects and the usual pages are talking about how we're trying to buy votes. Well, we're trying to bribe you to vote, yes, I suppose. But we don't care who you vote for. We're not going to ask that. It's not like you have to vote for Trump or Harris or Cruz or Allred. It doesn't matter. Yeah, right. So when you see some knucklehead put something out on the posting, they're just trying to stir things up. Because we honestly, Otto and I agree on a lot of things and disagree on some things, and it's all great and cordial. And so it's not like we're trying to direct the election towards a certain way. But anyway, send the pictures in, and you'll be in that raffle. $50 at Gina's. You'll be glad you got it. Also, thank you to Wild Cigar. They got stuff going on as well. And at end of this week on Friday night, they're going to have a national unveiling of a new cigar brand from a major manufacturer, a major dealer of cigars. And so they chose Wild to be like their premier site. So that tells you what kind of regard Wild Cigar has in that world. And it's a different world. Certainly, I've talked to Chris and Nathan, and it's a culture all unto itself. And so go there and check it out. Also, they have a lot of stuff associated with the college football games. And there was a wild weekend this past weekend, definitely. But they always have the games on, but not so loud that you can't hear yourself think. Enjoy the game with a friend, a cigar, a drink, whatnot. So Wild Cigar, check it out over by on Hidden Creek, over by the Standard. Also, thank you to our friends at Southern Gym. My wife told me this morning to remind me and remind y'all that on December 5th, Southern Gym is going to have a little Christmas get-together. We're going to have a little jazz trio, and they'll have the usual catering done. Usually it's done by American Revelry, and they'll have cocktails and things of that nature, and also great jewelry deals. It's Christmas time. They'll be expanding their hours after Thanksgiving, including Mondays and later hours, and every Saturday. I think they start every Saturday now. if I recall, because my wife's working this Saturday. So it's going to be a lot of fun over there. And so men and women, you could buy your true love a nice piece of jewelry over there, and it's going to be affordable, and it's going to be quality, and it's going to have the backing of a genuine gem expert in Gayla Moores. Also, thank you to John Williams at Old Pro Roofing at 817-734-2756. Check your roof out. I checked the weather. It's not going to rain the rest of this month, so get it done. Get that roof inspected, because sooner or later we're going to have bad weather. We're going to have winter weather. It may only last 2 days, but you don't want to be caught short and find out then that your roof needs repairs. And also, I've been told many times about the insurance companies becoming more and more difficult about certain things. Now, I will say my insurance company, Texas Farm Bureau, treated me great when I had the water damage back in June. But the point is that not all insurance companies are Texas Farm Bureau. And so you need to have, if you're going to have roof repairs done, you better get it done, because they may not pay off when you have damage because you didn't get the repairs done. So take care of it, please. Also, Jeff Kelly was on last week. We talked about Burleson Real Estate. He's over with the Weathington Agency, 817-781-0546. Also, Jeff at jeffkellyrealty.com. He has several houses for sale. We showed the website. He had a really good conversation. We had a good conversation last Tuesday about what's going on in Burleson Real Estate and what the rates are doing, and how they haven't really shown up yet in the mortgage market, but they're starting to drift down. My friends over at Camco Mortgage tell me that, but still, people are still kind of holding off for more, I suppose. But Jeff Kelly is somebody you want to know, because he sold a bunch of houses last year, and so he knows this market, he knows this area, and so be sure to call him. Also, Saturday we have the pub crawl with Local Life. Tiffany is, there it is. All right. Tiffany's going to be putting that together as always. It's always a good time. Go onto that webpage and she'll have the QR code and buy either a $25 ticket or a $50 ticket. And with the more expensive ticket, you get all the swag that goes with it. But basically, you're going to be buying like a wristband, and you can go to the various participating restaurants and bars in Old Town, and they have specials and on appetizers, drinks, etc. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. And also, you check out this month's Local Life magazine. I think it has Hard 8 on the cover, because they won that Best Fest, BTX Best Fest, for some sort of entree that I haven't been able to try it, but there you go. Otto, I had pickle pizza, and I'm like, oh, okay. But apparently, I'd have a taste of it, but apparently several people did, and they said it was great. And I'm like, I wouldn't have thought of that, but there you go. Now, I like this picture. Why don't you throw out that picture of Mr. Trump there right at the beginning? Yes, there he is, working the McDonald's shift. We had a video, but I don't know if I'll have enough time to show it all, but it really cracked me up when I saw that, because, that's not exactly the normal routine. And, of course, he had to have the tie, and so we can't have that without the tie. But the thing about it is, in the Trump campaign, they show him leaning out the window. Oh, I didn't send you that. You found that yourself, bud?
I got you another one, too.
Oh, really? Got another one? Can you imagine you pulling up for your Big Mac and there's Trump hanging out the window? I mean, wouldn't you just thought, am I in some sort of, reality show or whatever else? But it's really kind of funny to see that. But the video shows him, working the fry grill and all that other stuff. And people said, oh, that's just a stunt. Oh, really? Who ever heard of a stunt during an election? I never heard of such a thing. Have you ever heard of such a thing, Taylor?
Stunts during an election?
Tell me no. But anyway, it's I thought that was kind of amusing. Today I'm going to talk about the state of the election. And I said on this morning's Facebook announcement, I'm going to have 3 reasons why Trump can win and 3 reasons why Harris can win. I actually have 4 each, because I kept thinking about it. I said, there's more than that. But as far as the Trump-Harris election, if the polls are even somewhat accurate, this is going to be right down to the wire. One of those every vote counts kind of routine. And think about it this way. In the last 2 elections that Trump has been part of, the winner of the Electoral College, first him and then, of course, and then Biden, the number of votes that it took to get that Electoral College victory was very, very slim. Joe Biden won the Electoral College by a combined 43,000 votes spread over Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona. Had Trump won those states, and he lost like by 11,000 in Georgia and like 11,000 in Arizona. And you think, well, that's a lot of votes. No, it's not. Not in a statewide election. And he lost by like 20,000 in Wisconsin, which is still not a lot in a statewide election. If he won those states, he'd win Electoral College. And that's what they're counting on now. Some more optimistic Trump prognosticators think he's going to win the popular vote as well. I doubt that very seriously. California alone will make that probably in Ms. Harris's favor, but that's the way it is. Here's the status right now of the national polls, which to me have some limited value, but the national polls here show Ms. Harris up by a combined 1.0 in the Real Clear average. And you look at some of the polls, and you see the blue that are favoring Harris, and the red that are favoring Mr. Trump. And some of these polls are better than others. But basically what will happen is there are some lesser quality polls, but they're divided between pro-Harris and pro-Trump, so they kind of cancel each other out. The ones I've always looked at and had the most regard for is Emerson. Fox News does a good one. The NBC and CBS and ABC polls are pretty good. Siena College, Emerson College, I mentioned, Marist College. Those are the ones that are usually the best. But there's also another thing you should look at the polls when you look at these things is also the time in which they were given. And, they're usually they put on the top of the list, the latest one, and you see the trend lines developing. One of the things I teach in my government class is a concept called the bandwagon effect in polling. And so even if the polls are just a little bit off, when people who really aren't paying a lot of attention to this, grind into it like dorks like I do, then when they see this kind of drift towards one another, they'll end up jumping on, usually the winner. This happened big time in 2008. You look at the Obama-McCain election, you go in 3 weeks into it, Obama was up by like 2 points in the national polls, and then by election day, he was up by around 6 because the undecided, started breaking towards Mr. Obama, and he ends up winning it's one of the more accurately predicted elections in terms of the poll numbers. I think he came in with like 5.5 or something like that. There also is another thing you need to understand, and this is a mathematical truism, is that Republicans tend to be underrepresented in a lot of these polls, not by a great degree, but to some degree. And in 2008, Ms. Clinton had like a 3.5 point lead, and at the end, she got the popular vote by less than half a point. So Trump overperformed around 3 points. At this time in 2020, Mr. Biden was up nearly 9 points, and he ends up winning around 3.5. So he vastly underperformed, or Trump overperformed. Depends how you want to look at it. So the point is, you look at a national poll, and it shows Ms. Harris at 0.1 or 1.0. The Democrats are very concerned about that. They're not looking at it as they have a lead. They feel like because of the tendency of the Republicans to overperform on the polls or at election day, then they're concerned because the smart guys are saying in reality Mr. Trump may be ahead nationally, which would be astounding. But we'll get to the states in a bit because it's. There's several of them. I picked about 3 or 4 of them, but there's several states. Texas is not considered a toss-up state. Now, Trump is not going to have a landslide in Texas. He'll end up winning about 6 points, which is what he did with Mr. Biden, and he won about like 7 points with Ms. Clinton. So, it's not going to be like it was maybe when George W. Bush was running, but there you are. Why are some of the reasons I think Ms. Harris will win? And why are some of the reasons why I think Mr. Trump will win? Let's go with Ms. Harris first. Why not? First of all, the media has really been jumping all over Trump about his rhetoric lately. And Trump gives them, of course, the ammunition to do that. So reason number one is that the major news media has been showing more and more of these more, shall we say, erratic statements Mr. Trump made. This past weekend, he was in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, which is the birthplace of Arnold Palmer, and he made a lot of crude comments about Mr. Palmer. about what a man he was, et cetera, et cetera. I don't need to get any further than that. And they noticed that. Taylor, you put up the slide about what New York Times is saying. It's the rhetoric, they're starting to dial in on it. They talk about, here it is on the New York Times, Trump's meandering speeches motivate his critics and worry his allies. My response to that is Mr. Trump has never been a disciplined speaker at all. But what they're trying now is they're trying to make Mr. Trump to be the older, less mentally capable candidate. And Harris is pushing that pretty hard. Is that a narrative that sticks? To some people, it does. Okay. Ms. Harris is about 18 years younger and whatnot. And I think for some people, that's going to be a deciding factor. So reason number one, I think Harris will win is because the constant exposure of Mr. Trump and some of his less than presidential statements, shall we say. A lot of people say, I love that about him. Well, there's a difference of being candid and off the cuff a bit and being crude. And that's sometimes he dives into vulgarities. Okay, you don't need to be vulgar to be, plain spoken. And that's what happens with Mr. Trump, is sometimes he gets into just outright vulgarities. Second reason, there is a legitimate gender gap. Ms. Harris does much, much better with women than Mr. Trump does in the vote count. I mean, it's like 20 points, 25 points. It's significant. A lot of that has to do with the abortion issue, which is the only issue that really Ms. Harris has stuck to consistently throughout the last 5 years. But the Democrats have been pushing that narrative quite a bit. Now, is abortion a game changer in the national election? The reason I don't really think so is because many of the states in which abortion is more an important issue already have it protected in their state constitutions. And there's going to be 2 states, red states, Arizona and Florida, on the election day, that have constitutional amendments that will protect abortion rights. But, I don't think it's going to affect the presidential race. You could have a lot of Republicans that may vote in favor of those amendments and still vote Republican. So, but anyway, the point is that the gender gap is real. Women tend to vote more than men anyway, by 2 to 3 to 5 points sometimes. And so a gender gap is significant. It is not something to be lightly discarded, because women tend to vote more. They tend to be more politically active. They tend to be the kind that would knock on the doors and make the phone calls to their friends and neighbors and things of that nature. They seem to dial in on the issues that concern not just abortion and whatnot, because it kind of drives me a little nuts when they say abortion's strictly a woman's issue, because I know a lot of women that are pro-life. So, but that's what they phrase it as. But they tend to be more active in getting the vote out, and that's going to be definitely in Harris's favor. Another factor is the Democratic ground game, as they call it. Democrats traditionally have been much better at getting the vote out during these election seasons. It's not just election day. The unions and like the teacher groups in the Midwest and Northeast, the minority-based outreach groups, they are much better at getting the vote out. The black churches in the inner cities, the whole mechanism. She has literally 3 times more money than Mr. Trump. She has broken all records in fundraising. She's raised over $1 billion in the last 10 weeks. And how does that money translate? It isn't just a bunch of new commercials. It's also paying people to shake the bushes for every voter. That is probably the number one reason why I think Harris can win this thing, is because the Democratic ground game in states like Pennsylvania and Michigan are impressive. Okay, and Republicans, they don't rely on the ground game as much. They rely on individual voter initiative, which sounds great, but when you got a major institutional advantage like that, plus the federal government is going to be getting the vote out, because Mr. Trump has made it very clear he's going to take away a lot of the job protections if he's elected. They're going to be out in force. You can forget about winning Maryland or Virginia. That's not going to happen, or most of your state capitals. Now the point is that this is, again, of the four reasons, this is, I think, the biggest one, is that the Democrats do better at getting the vote out. And they have the mechanisms, and they surely have the money now. Television ads are what they are. They're, sometimes they're, informative, sometimes they're just trash. But nothing beats having somebody, hey, buddy, let me take you to the polls. Or we're having a bus, our church or our organization is having a bus. Now, it'll be real clear, churches are not allowed to be political partisans, but they're not prevented from being political participants, okay? So I've heard this criticism, hey, how about, those churches, they're not supposed to be doing this. They can't tell you how to vote, but they can get you to the place where you can vote. That's all legit. So we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. And fourthly, I know a lot of people dislike the media a lot. And the fact, for the first time in Gallup polling, the media has a lower trust or approval rating than the Congress, which takes a lot of doing. But it does factor into it. Now, a lot of people say, Allard, I don't look at the New York Times. I don't read the Washington Post. I don't do all this stuff. I don't watch NBC News. I watch Fox or I watch News Nation or whatever. Whatever you watch or whatever you read, even if it's not the source itself, is almost always responding to those sources. Even in our social media world, media does have a lot of impact, and a constant barrage on the news networks and the major news makers or news reporters and the news talk shows and all that, like Meet the Press and all that, does have an impact because the people that you watch maybe are responding to those things. And so you're getting an idea what they're saying. And having almost a universal Harris supporting media, other than maybe Fox and News Nation, is an advantage, regardless if it's something that you partake in or not. As far as like celebrity endorsements and all that, I don't know if Taylor Swift moved the needle. There's about maybe 3 or 4 celebrities I think that really could change the outcome. Not so much that, like a Swiftie was going to vote for Trump and then all of a sudden she's going to now vote for Harris. But maybe some of those Swifties will be inspired to, go out and vote, which they may not have done before. Oprah Winfrey still has a lot of pull with the African-American community. As far as like athletes, maybe LeBron James, he might could do it. I think Patrick Mahomes had the best answers. He said, I'm not going to use my platform for that. You go vote for who you want to. Also, as far as actors, George Clooney's pretty active and all that, but I don't know if George Clooney really is going to relate to the younger generation. So there you are. So to sum up the reasons why I think Ms. Harris will win is because Trump's rhetoric has gone a little bit further off the beam than it should. I think he's so confident of victory, he's not even has his own safeguards anymore about that. Is he going to do all those things he says he's going to do? I kind of doubt it, but that's not the point. You say those things, it's going to scare people. If you're going to talk about the kind of things he has in mind, and you call, people, even if they're here illegally, you call them vermin that carry disease and they poison our blood, a lot of non-immigrant people are going to be offended by that. And because that's a harsh thing to say about another human being. All right. And also the gender gap is a big issue. And the Democratic, like I mentioned, the Democratic ground game is formidable, to say the least. And then you have near universal support in the national media. Those things add to her favor. So does Trump have a chance? Absolutely he does. Okay. What is in Trump's favor? One is that Ms. Harris has so completely changed her policies from 5 years ago. There's a great deal of distrust that she won't revert back to them if she's elected. All right. If you have that slide there with the Fox News interview, if you would, please. This interview got criticized a lot, but they're criticizing Brett Baer for being too harsh on her and all this other stuff. When you bitch about the refs, you've lost the game. That's what's happened here. They're complaining about Harris getting grilled by an unfriendly interviewer, and to me, I'm like, are you kidding me? Have you seen what they do with Trump every time he goes for an interview? When he went on that debate with Harris, and he had to deal with David Muir and Martha Raddatz, I believe. No, that wasn't her. It was another woman. I'm sorry, I forgot who it was. But basically, they were fact checking him the whole time. Which if she can't handle Brett Baer, how's she going to handle tougher people like Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin? If she can't handle an interview where she's basically getting put to the test, and she failed this interview. I mean, I saw enough of it that she failed it because she got indignant and flustered. And it's like, well, if people say, well, Brett Baer was not, a gentleman or he wasn't fair or whatever else, the media is not going to be fair with these candidates. And if you can't deal with that, you're going to have a real problem. But here's the thing is, what was he grilling her on? How she changed her views. In 2019, she opposed fracking. She opposed private health insurance. She was in favor of government-paid transition surgeries for minors even, or aliens, or illegal immigrants, or inmates. And none of these things are taken out of context. There's the video in the debates and her public speeches she made while she was running in 2019 and 20 that said these things. All right, so they have the tape. And she said, I never was opposed to fracking. Well, yes, you were. She was in favor of an electric vehicle mandate. Now she's not, even though her administration she served with basically signed a mandate that by 2029, half the cars will be made, they'll be EVs, and by 2035, there won't be any more gasoline-driven cars. Now, if you like electric cars, great, but you should have a choice in that. Taylor, you drive an electric car. Do you like it?
I love it.
Well, it's great, right?
It is great.
But you chose to do it, right?
I did choose to do it.
Right.
Not because I'm a tree hugger or any of that, because the technology is cool.
Okay. What if they said you must get rid of your old Mustang and you have to start driving this? Would you be as on board?
I don't think they should make you choose what to drive.
Yeah. Well, they Biden-Harris administration
But I do get charged a lot more in tags.
Well, it's like
Stupid.
Yeah, and your tires are more expensive. I get it. And,
Yeah.
if you want an electric vehicle, go get one. That's fine. But it being mandated. And here's the thing about it. They talk about being friend of the UAW. It takes about a third less workers to make an EV than it does a gasoline-powered car or a diesel-powered vehicle. So they're basically going to be shutting down a lot of industries in Michigan that they're trying to win right now. And a lot of the auto workers know that. Now, the UAW endorsed Harris, but the leadership did. But the auto workers they're a lot more split. So that's the thing right there. Can we trust that to be true, that she's not going to ban fracking in Pennsylvania? My concern is this: the progressive side of the Democrat Party have all kind of agreed amongst themselves not to rock the boat. But when she gets inaugurated, then they'll start making their demands. And that's what I'm concerned. And even Bernie Sanders said, well, she's just saying what she needs to say to get elected. But I'm quite sure that once the Progressive Party is now allowed to be more assertive, they're going to push her to take on these more progressive policies because they're going to feel like they were owed something. They didn't rock the boat when she said no more fracking. I never said that, or no ban on fracking is, I guess, what I should say. They didn't rock the boat when they're talking about her having a tougher border. Does anybody really believe that she's been tough on the border? Of course not. All right? No. All right? It's insulting almost for her to think that she's been really tough on the border. And she's going to, put up a wall. She says she's going to help fund the wall and all that. Does anybody really believe the Progressive Party is going to allow her to build the wall at the river and to pursue a much more aggressive deportation policy? That ain't going to happen. And so that's another reason. I just don't think her rhetoric is going to be held up. Another reason I think Trump has a good chance of winning is he has the lead in the polls on the two biggest issues: the economy and the border. And a lot of people may say, well, Donald Trump's a jackass, but we got to do something about that border. And the Democrat Party in the last 4 years hasn't done anything about it. And you see the ads, and they're, playing on your fears. And I think that's going to be a real decisive issue for a lot of people. They're going to come down to it and say, well, I don't care for Mr. Trump's personality. I think he's a vulgar, crude man, but I'm not voting for a deacon. I need to have somebody who's going to bring in some order down at the border and also reinstate some of the, some of the economic policies he had while he was president the first time. Now, this is a side note for me. There's some of the policies I hope that Mr. Trump is not able to maintain. I think the tariff idea is terrible, but a lot of people remember 2017 through 20 until the COVID hit. They look at that as better economic times they have now. No inflation, the jobs are steady and all this other business. And they talk about all the job growth in the Biden-Harris administration. Well, yeah, after you bottom out at COVID, yeah, you're going to get rebound, but there you are. A third thing I think is going to be the Biden-Harris foreign policy. First of all, I'll say I am in support of us maintaining support of the Ukraine initiative against Russia. But Joe Biden has not handled that very well at all. He has dribbled and drabbed it out there and kept this fight going longer than maybe it should have, just because of his reluctance to alienate some of the people in his party with his Ukraine support. And Harris is right on board with that. And so when they ask her about the Ukraine support, she gives a very generic answer. And I just don't know if she's going to have the wherewithal and the strength of will to buck the part of her party that does not want to deal with Ukraine. And there's a faction in the Republican Party that doesn't want to do it either. And how is she going to deal with them? So, and then you go back to Afghanistan, and she talks about how well they did pulling out of Afghanistan. That's just delusional. That was a disaster. And so, and Biden's popularity never recovered. And when she was asked, by the way, I tried to find a good clip on this, but I really couldn't find it. But she was asked about 2 weeks on The View by a very sympathetic host, what she'd do different to Mr. Biden. She says, nothing comes to mind. Nothing comes to mind? Are you kidding? You don't have to throw him under the bus and call him a, decrepit old man. You could say something along the lines, I love Joe Biden, I really do, but there will be a couple of things I'll do different, and this will be one, and this will be another. And nobody's going to be offended by that. But she couldn't do it. I saw Bill Maher talk about this on his show. Now, I'd love to show Bill Maher on here, but he drops a few F-bombs in there, so it's an adult. Yeah. Do you watch Bill Maher by any chance?
Maybe a couple clips here and there, but not regularly.
Yeah, well, I don't get HBO, but they put some of the clips on YouTube.
Yeah.
And that's when I watch it. And he always has at the very end of the show, and finally, new rule, blah, 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 blah. And that's where he gets in his monologue. And he hammered her because he showed that clip of her on The View saying nothing comes to mind. And Maher about lost it because he knew what a bad answer that was. All right. So it's that, and so that's the problem here. And I guess the last reason is Trump always underperforms in the polls. Okay. And so we'll see if that's true this time as well. But he always underperforms in polls. Both the times he's been on the national ticket, he's overperformed. And so they are. Now, so to sum up Mr. Trump's chances, I think a lot of people are very concerned about Ms. Harris's 180 on so many issues, and the fact that even though she has all this money and all this advantage, that news media is starting to ask, why is she not running away with this right now? There must be something going on. And also the fact is that with Trump, he's seen as better to handle the economy and better to handle borders. And that is going to be the two major factors. Abortion's on the list, yes. But you have to remember, when you get like 30% say abortion's important, they could be asking people like my wife or Megan Swearingen. Yeah, it's important to them. They just don't have the same answer as somebody that is, pro-choice. So I always put a grain of salt with that one. Now, all that being said, let's look at the state polls. And then I'm going to give my final prognostication, all right? Well, let's just throw them up there or whatever. What do you got, Taylor? It's okay. What do you got here? Michigan. Okay. Here you have Mr. Trump up by 1.2 in Michigan. Now, by the way, this is Real Clear Politics, and there's 2 or 3 other poll accumulation websites like Nate Silver, and there's another one that people talk about, or 538 is another one they talk about, and they're going to have slight differences. All they reflect is the different polls and the different margins of error and all that other stuff. But right now, according to this, Mr. Trump is winning Michigan. Here's a fifth reason, I guess I should have said. Trump is doing very well for a Republican with the Black and Latino vote, particularly with the male vote. And that's got them very concerned in places like Detroit and Atlanta and Western Pennsylvania. So that's another factor. Also, look at what's another one we got here? We got Pennsylvania, where he's up by 0.03. You know, basically the margin of error in all these is between 3 and 3.5. So Ms. Harris actually in reality could be up in Pennsylvania. But what's happening is you look at the latest polls, and they do show Mr. Trump barely ahead. Now, Pennsylvania is really going to be where it all comes down, I think. That's where the election will be won or lost, barring some unforeseen state going one way or the other, like North Carolina going for Harris or Colorado going for, that's not going to happen, but, something like that anyway. So you look at all the battleground states here. Arizona is at 1 point. Okay, I got the glare on the screen. 1.6. You've got Nevada barely ahead, which has not been the latest things. Usually Harris has been ahead, but he's barely ahead in Nevada. Wisconsin 0.2, which is, these are all effectively ties. 1.2, 0.03, like I mentioned, Pennsylvania, 1.5 in North Carolina, Georgia 1.0. The margins are so narrow that no real prediction can be confidently made. And there you go. Okay. Hey, let's sort of Cruz and Allred, because they had a debate last week. I heard on the radio. I had class, so I heard on the radio it's coming by. Right now, Cruz total is up 4.5. Now, that's not really a large margin, but Cruz barely won in 2018 against O'Rourke at 2.5 points. I have a feeling that Cruz is going to win by about 4, roughly. Allred has run a pretty good race. I do believe that the commercials on his support for transgender males playing in girls' sports has hurt him. I do believe that there have been some comments he's made about the border that has hurt him. But Allred, do not be surprised if he does what O'Rourke did, and that is run for governor a couple years after a Senate race. Or not about 4 years. The next say it right, dummy. The next governor's race is in 2 years. I would not be surprised if Colin Allred will be the main Democrat contender. And would he beat Greg Abbott? That'd be tough. But I think he's a legitimate Democrat candidate, as opposed to just somebody they threw up there like they've done in the past. Now, as far as my personal opinion, I've told this to many people. I've said this on the show. Who do I think is going to win? I say this with no confidence whatsoever, but I think Harris is going to win because the Democratic ability to get the vote out. I don't know how I'm going to feel the day after the election, because I do understand the concerns a lot of people have about Mr. Trump. A lot of those are legitimate. He's said a lot of things that really did not need to be said, and he has a couple of policies that concern me greatly, like the fact that his tax policies would just blow up the deficits if they actually got into place. The tariffs are going to be terrible. On the other hand, I have very big concerns if Harris wins. I do believe that the progressive wing of her party will prevent her, even if she wanted to take more proactive action on the border. And you're going to see things like tax on unearned wealth gain, the unrealized capital gains, as they call it. And so if and they say, well, it's only going to affect people at $100 million. Well, I don't believe that either. I believe that because it'll drop lower than that. But I have real concerns about the pressure the progressive wing of her party would put on what kind of judges and justices she would select. My biggest concern also is about the Senate race. They've already said that they're going to do away with the filibuster on certain issues like abortion. They're going to pass a national right to an abortion. Okay. And you may find that fine and dandy. Okay. I am pro-life. I would be opposed to that. But, what really would bother me is how they do it. They would suspend the filibuster to make that happen if the Democrats control Congress. They've said this would be the only time they do it. Well, that's rubbish, because what's going to happen is all these groups that supported Harris are coming to say, hey, you did it for them. We want you to do it for us. People that, gun control or the Green New Deal or, open borders or immediate citizenship for those here illegally and things like that. And they're going to be, and the Democrats in the Senate will be pressured by all their big money groups to do for them what they did for the abortion issue. And they basically eliminate the filibuster. And if you think the filibuster is an annoying impediment to getting things done, it can be, but it also makes sure that the minority party and the minority of the citizens are not going to be run over by the tyranny of the majority, as Madison called it. Basically it would mean the end of having the minority party in the Senate have any say in what's going on. It'd be more like the House. In the House, it's all about the majority. If you have the majority in the House of Representatives, you have all the control, all the levers of power. And they don't have to deal with the minority at all. They could pass every vote, no straight party vote, and that's it. There's no mechanisms in place in the House for the minority party to slow or impede legislation that would hurt their constituents. And the Senate, the filibuster, and the unanimous consent agreement, which means everybody has to be on board with bringing it to a debate, keeps that from happening. It mandates that you go reach across the aisle and get enough of the minority party to make this happen. Now, I'll be interested to see how enthusiastic people are about in the Democrat Senate about the filibuster if they don't take over. I'll be interested to see if they're now in the minority, if they're all of a sudden excited about the filibuster like they were when they tried to end it. This has already tried to happen about 2 years ago when they tried to end the filibuster about voting rights bills. Now, you say voting rights is important, but if you're in the minority and you have no means of making any influence at all on the legislative process, then really our system that we've created is meaningless. We'll be more like a parliament, basically, where the minority in the parliament has nothing. So that's the deal. That's my concern. As far as early voting, Taylor, I sent you that link to where the sites are, I believe. Yeah, here they are. Yeah, I don't know if you could see it very clearly unless you get real close to your screen. Most of us here in Burleson are going to vote at the sub-courthouse across on BHS. But in Cleburne, the early voting is at the Conference Center. Also in Godley, at the City Park Pavilion of Godley. So you live out there, you can go early vote there. I mentioned the sub-courthouse for Burleson. Also, if you live over in the Cleburne area, you can also go to the main address. I'm trying to say the county seat. There you go. Say it right, dummy. Not City Hall. It's over at the old courthouse in downtown Cleburne. And then, of course, I have the other one on the Conference Center on Henderson. Okay, also, Alvarado Sub-Courthouse. I've actually used that one before because it's about the same distance. It's on Ball Street. Also, they have the maintenance facility, Precinct 3 maintenance facility, which is on 917. Technically, it's in Alvarado, but it's on 917, and so it's easy to get to. Also, the Keene City Hall, if you live out in Keene. And lastly, in Venus at the Venus Community Center. So everybody around here should have a place they can go for early voting. Now, on the day itself, you go to your precinct. So, but if you vote early, it's all going to be held in those locations. Okay. Anyway, that's my show for today. I was going to have Jennifer Woods on today, but she's not doing well physically. I mean, she's ill. It's all the junk in the air. Robin's having the same thing. I have a little bit of it, but Jennifer called me and said, I just feel terrible. And it's because all the stuff flying around in the air. So just give her a little message saying you're thinking of her. We're going to try to get her on again because, as we all know, she'll be leaving Harvest House pretty soon. On Tuesday afternoon, mid-afternoon, to accommodate schedules, I'm going to have Jack Matson and Mike Perdue
Thursday.
on. Oh, yeah, that's right. Thursday. Dadgummit. Scratch that. It's Thursday at 2 o'clock. I just get so dialed in. Thursday at 2 o'clock, Jack Matson and Mike Perdue at Toys for Tots. They're going to be starting that again, and it was a great success last year, and we're going to get started again this year. Anyway, thanks for indulging me in my little rant. I share this if you will. I hope it gives you something to think about. I am concerned very much the day after the election. Here's an addendum. Don't expect to know who won the election by November 6th.
What?
Yes. 3 states in particular that are very closely contested have very bizarre rules about counting their absentee ballots. Georgia, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. They don't start counting them in Pennsylvania and Georgia till the day of the election. And Arizona is like 2 or 3 days before. So what's going to happen is, this is what we got to be really concerned about, is that Tuesday night on November 5th, very likely Trump will be ahead in these states because Republicans tend to vote on the day of more so, or earlier. They don't do mail voting very often, as often. And so, like Pennsylvania and these others have a lot of mail-in ballots they have to count, and it takes forever. We may not know who won Pennsylvania till like that Saturday, or same with Georgia, same with Arizona, possibly Michigan, possibly North Carolina because of that hurricane may delay it, some of the counting. And so, if that's my concern, is we're going to go into Tuesday night and Trump will be ahead. And then when these other ballots are counted, this is exactly what happened in 2020.
Yeah, they dumped all the fake ballots overnight.
Yeah, and here we go again. See, that's that's what it's going to be said. Pennsylvania, he was winning until they counted all the mail-in votes and he lost, and he said it was because of fake ballots, and he had videos of people supposedly
Too big to rig.
Yeah, something. Look. Are our elections perfectly run? Of course not, as long as human beings do it. I think malfeasance is less of a factor than sometimes just mistakes. But I don't think these mistakes altered the 2020 election. Second of all, is that it doesn't take anything in our social media day for some rumor to start. And with AI and with Photoshop, but AI in particular, you're going to get a lot of misdirection, what's going on. And I'm just concerned about, I hope our country doesn't go into some big tangle about this like we did before. Anyway, you vote for how your conscience tells you. I'm not going to tell you how to vote, certainly. That's not my job, nor as it should be. But you need to vote. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the one thing that gets through to politicians more than even money is votes. And that's what they listen to. And if you think the politicians aren't listening to you, well, here's your chance. So vote for whom your conscience dictates, and there you go. And we'll see you all Thursday afternoon.